So what is JINOWA? JINOWA, Root and Circle to Earth, is an international consortium established on May 1st, 2021 in Italy, inspired by Japan's ancient culture and traditional ecological knowledge aimed at working to restore the global ecosystem, shifting to a zero-waste society to return all of our lives to the fertilized soil. JINOWA Innovator Live Talk series is presented by JINOWA. Every first Friday of the month, our host Carlo Nesler, a fermentation master and agroecologist, invites top creators and innovators from various fields around the world to talk about how we can create a healthier state of humanity, ecosystems, and the earth. We welcome leading innovators from a wide range of fields that are transforming right now, such as cutting edge, biological clothing, food, and housing that restores the soil and the environment. The online talk series aims to cross borders and link people from different regions and is a space where we can discuss topics that are important to all of us. Our main host, Carlo Nesler, is the founder of the fermentation lab, CibOfficina Microbiotica in Viterbo, where he experiments, produces, and researches about fermentation and agroecology. Carlo teaches fermentation all over Italy and abroad. He also translated American fermentation expert Sandor Cad's book, Wild Fermentation, into Italian, which is considered to be the most authoritative publication on the subject of fermentation. Okay, so before we have Carlos speak, I want to introduce you to JINOWA Consortium team. Hello, ciao, Yukako, Saito, Yukari, and Kenta.
Hello.
Hello, aloha. Yukako Saito is the founder of JINOWA, and she started Genuine Education Network in 2014, Italy, providing international education about food and soil. Let's hear more about JINOWA from Yukako.
Thank you, Tomoko. Thank you, everyone. Hello, konnichiwa. そして、grazie, buongiorno. I'm Yukako. I'm going to talk about what is JINOWA and what is our aim and goal of our project. So please let me share the screen for a while. Okay. So I'm more than pleased to personally convey my heartfelt thanks to everyone and every participant of this first JINOWA talk. Thank you so much. Then I'd like to thank both Carlo and Johnny. He's joined us from South America now, right? It's very early morning. And then I'm sure both of them will give us our amazing insight and valuable contribution to our collective missions. So GEN, I'm a founder of the GEN, which is the company founded in the 2014. And I had the privileges of being the first non-European to be selected under the Italian government innovative social startup and founded GEN in Milano. And one of my goals with GEN over the past 7 years are dealing with participants from more than 30 countries. And I believe that some of you previously joined our program before, and then has been to be a bridge between Japan and the world. So providing this type of study trip program for showcasing the sustainable elements within Japanese culture and thousands of years of unique, traditional, and then preserving the natural ecosystem and respect invisible microorganisms in order to live in harmony with nature by returning everything back to the nature. So inspired by Japanese ancient culture and traditional ecological knowledge technique, let me share some example. So you see on the screen, like indigo dyeing. This is a tradition that exists not only in Japan, in many countries in Asia, but but also at the same time, it had the power to prevent like spiritual negativity as well. And also it has several medicacy, so several medical properties for the crows. And then another example you see on the right-hand side, this is a traditional Japanese architecture technique. So using raw clay, which is called Tsuchikabe in Japanese and terra cruda in Italiano, is a construction technique where we use fermented soil that contain plenty of living microorganisms, and it's not burned to foster and root and natural benefit microorganism. So this is why even now traditional miso and soy sauce are made in such a clay wall cellars to keep the process all natural and eco-friendly. So so such a traditional so such a relationship between like architecture and the fungus or those invisible microorganisms are being studied in the institution around the world right now. It's as the most advanced topics, and that is called like MOVE. That is stand for microbiome or built environment. And but it's culture and traditional part since 1,000 years in Japan. So to think about association and human being and microorganism, this is quite hot issue. And also we have to think about health, which is another hot issue today, because we are now under the threat worldwide and the way humans interact with invisible virus and fungus being questions. So what do we do? Better confront a situation like COVID-19 right now, or maybe coming another major pandemic. So yes, well, some of you maybe said like we can have a vaccinate, but I think that many of you like an expert of the fermentations or highly concerned about sustainability probably prefer to choose some more fundamental solutions like, substantially increasing the innate immunity to protect our body. So since I learned about food, when I think in nature, immunity, natural immunity, I started to think about diversity too. So common to wine and miso, which is probably the color we're going to talk a lot today, and then perhaps several fermented food, you will notice such a healthy food are full of taste, well-rounded, and feel like a fusion of flavor. So this is sometimes explained as a complex flavor, very complicated with lots of things in it. But I think that is the taste is so complex because of the production of the tremendous number of amino acid by the action of a great variety of microorganisms present. So this is already known that interesting bacteria regulated gut health, and which is the primary engine of drive immune, also related to even our mental health. So this is very important. And then this is also impossible to artificially increasing only good bacteria. We cannot live only with the good things. It has to be balanced. So each body is different and affected by so many factors. So well-balanced manner, that is the most important things we think about. So however, it is necessary to model the power of nature, which takes a long time. It's not even replicable, by the industrial way. So create such diversity and maintain balance is taking a long time. So when we approach things this way, so we are discussing the comparison of two systems, the issue that we are facing now with the human health and the mechanism of the earth and the nature cycles are actually not two separated issue or two separated ecosystem, but it's actually two sides of the same coin. So which brings me to the crucial point: in order to make Earth healthy, we need to raise its immunity to recover naturally on its own through traditional and sustainable way of returning things back to the nature by protecting and restoring and increasing the diversity of microorganisms in the soil. So now you understand why I designed the soil restoration as the goal of the JINOWA. So Genoa is aiming to realize two things simply. So first of all, like today, like for all bigger goal of Genoa is facilitate and onboard a broad international perspective and the community engagement and sharing the best practice. And then ecological knowledge on the circular economy through increasing network, learning, collaboration, and a partnership. And more importantly, this needed to go beyond the food into more holistic approach, encompassing a completely way of living. So be it our architecture, home constructions, or any even like fashions, whatever, choosing sustainable paths to zero waste and eco-friendly consumption model in order to preserve and restore our soil ecosystem. So as a part of sharing knowledge, the best practice, the Genoa Innovator Live Talk have been launched to enable international specialists like Carlo and Johnny, and like you, like expert creators and innovators from all around the world. And then I'm neither an environmental expert or medical scientist, but through studying various food, I could be I could realize this point. Then I think I'm qualified enough to join this network. So if you know someone who has a valuable story or solution for our purpose, and we'd like to invite them to present at this live talk, so please contact me or even using this chat function probably, and then share their profile and we will look forward to include them in the future session. So later, my colleague Yukari will talk about Genowa's first project, Jinen, which is exactly used the traditional Japanese soil technique. And we will be conducting a social experiment in the Venice to see if we can realize such a way of life. So in the end, I thank you again to Carlo and Johnny and welcome them to join the Genoa network to help to broaden our program today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kako.
Sorry, I'm gonna stop. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we will have Yukari and Kenta. They will be speaking in Italian. So please click on the interpretation button on the bottom right of your screen. So if you just joined our session, I just wanted to mention on the bottom right of your screen, you have this interpretation button. So you can click on that and choose between English and Japanese or Italian. So 日本語のね、通訳はこちら日本語のボタンですね。Interpretation で Japanese をクリックしてください。Okay, so next on will be Yukari. お願いします。
はい、お願いします。Buongiorno a tutti. Allora io condivido lo schermo. Ok. Allora, buongiorno a tutti, mi chiamo Yukari e mi occupo della comunicazione del progetto di Genoa. Il primo progetto di Genoa sarà eseguito insieme all'opera architettonica che si intitola Foresta Regenerativa Jinen dell'architetto giapponese Tono Mirai all'occasione della Biennale di Venezia 2021. La Biennale sarà il primo festival globale nel tempo di Covid, in cui architetti di alto livello, istituzioni e responsabili della politica urbana potranno partecipare e presentare gli approcci avanzati riguardo all'architettura sostenibile e allo sviluppo regionale su scala globale. Allora, Tono Mirai è un architetto contemporaneo che usa il materiale tradizionale giapponese terra. Da molti anni crea un'architettura che nasce dalla terra e ritorna alla terra, rendendo le persone e l'ambiente più sani, valorizzando le tecniche tradizionali e la connessione con la gente locale. La diapositiva a sinistra mostra l'opera di Tono e quella di destra è un modello della sua opera che sarà esposta a Venezia a partire dal 21 maggio. Okay. Jinen è un concetto orientale che significa ciò che si fa da sé, che non implica un abbandono della natura a sé, ma promuovendo piuttosto un rapporto simbiotico. Questo simbiotico è una parola che si usa molto nel mondo della fermentazione e mi piace molto, e tra uomo e natura nel quale i due si prendano cura uno dell'altro e si valorizzino a vicenda. L'opera Jinen esprime il piccolo ecosistema di Venezia ed è un'arte sostenibile e circolare, a rifiuti zero, utilizzando solo materiali naturali e reperiti nella periferia di Venezia più vicino possibile. E dopo la mostra tutti i materiali torneranno alla terra o avranno una nuova vita attraverso un sistema di circolazione upcycling. Ogni volta che c'è una grande mostra internazionale come
life, every time there is an international exhibition like the Biennale in Venice, we feel that local residents are worried about waste management, and that's why we would like to collect this feedback in order to improve the situation. Today, Antonio is an Italian architect which will be leading the project, and the project will start today in Venice, and we are ready to go and we're ready to start this journey with many other partnerships and stakeholders who may be interested to join us. Thank you very much. I will now leave the floor to Good evening to the audience in Japan, and good morning to the audience in Italy and the United States. I'm Kensaku Kenta, and I am a partner of this project because I strongly believe in the well-being, physical and mental well-being to be exact, and this is one of the pillars of our project. And I would like to underline that physical well-being is, of course, connected to how we eat, because we are what we eat. And that's why it's absolutely important to know the different foods, the tradition, and also food habits. Unfortunately, I am an expert in the field, and I can tell you that many young people are not aware about how certain vegetables are grown, for example, a tomato, because they are used to eat tomato sauce, and they don't know that there are over 500 varieties of tomatoes. So we have small tomatoes, we have cherry tomatoes, we have, for example, San Marzano tomatoes from the different regional areas, the Pacchino tomato with denomination of certified denomination of origin. There are many different tomatoes which come in any shape and flavor. So if we indeed are what we eat, why don't we know the food? Well, Hello, Carlo. Nice to see you. And Stefano. Hello, Carlo. So they are very important partners because our cooperation start from the concept of well-being. I'm sure you have watched the video, and they are the intermediaries of our ability to convey this message. And the message is made up of many different aspects, like agriculture, like soil management techniques. And these are the pillars of our concept. Carlo's approach has particularly interested us, and that's why we asked him to join us, because we would like to connect all the people interested in well-being to know all these messages. And that's why we started many projects, initiatives, trips in order to raise awareness with a touch of innovation. I will now leave the floor to the protagonist of this talk, Carlo, and he will tell us more about food and his personal concept.
Carlo, aloha.
Hello, good morning or good evening to everyone. Well, the introduction of Kenta has been really interesting. It has been a really interesting meeting, the one we had with Yukako, Kenta, and Yukari, with this world of Genoa that is growing in this form of association with the idea of bringing knowledge and interactions between people that love something in particular that today is really important. I would like to talk about ecosystem, because the first thing that I think about when I listen to this type of speech is ecosystems. Maybe not everybody will think of the fact that a person like me, that I produce fermented products, kombucha, and then teaches people how to use fermentation. I teach cooks, even in important restaurants and chic restaurants to luxury restaurants, to use fermented products that are linked to our agriculture. So a world that is not so linked to luxury, it's agriculture. So why I would like to talk about ecosystem, because the definition of ecosystem is really interesting for me. An ecosystem is a system of beings that are related to each other. Of course, this includes many interaction through communication, through mutual relationships. So when we talk about ecosystems, when we analyze it from a general point of view, it seems that we are talking about something that is in between from reality, because of course we are related. Human beings are related, or beings that are not human and non-living organisms. There's always a relation. Everything is interconnected. But there is also a cultural link, because everything that we receive, of course, goes and passes through different knowledge and cultures. So I say often that through the things we do, we have to remember that we are creating culture. I have started fermentation many years ago because I was curious, because I had this passion. I liked cooking. So I started studying something that for me was really magical, because I was young and I thought it's really strange that a grape juice can become wine, and something made with water and flour, if you add some yeast, it will grow and it will change the flavor. So there are many fermented products, and this was really fascinating for me. Then I started producing this for me, for myself, for my family, for my friends. And then at a certain point, I show people how to do it. And then I started a small company, a very small company, but it was natural for me to say, well, if I make miso, why should I use soy that in my area, in the center of Italy, is not appropriate because we need too much water. And in summer in Italy, it doesn't rain so much. So the climate, it's not appropriate. So I thought, okay, let's see if we can do it with other legumes, with other cereals, compared to the ancient, the traditional culture of this fermented product. But by doing this, I realized that many people were asking me, what do you do? Why do you do it? Why do you do it this way? So why have you stopped using soy? And all these questions made me understand that when we do something important and related to culture. We create information that are useful for other people. So many guys told me, hey, can we see what you do? Can we help you? We would like to create a company that is linked to the territory. And I'm not talking about a national point of view. I am Italian, so Italian products are the best. No, is the area where I live. If I live in another country in the world, I would use different raw materials, because what is important is not my pride, but my relation with other human beings. My pride is just something that made me think that I'm not secure, that creates an obstacles, but I would like to add something to my culture. And this brings me to find another relationship, something that is linked to respect, to love. And I look around me and I see nature that welcomes me. So I try to give back to nature my love. So it's something mutual, like between people. And I think that it's really something really natural and it's normal. Then I call myself an intermediary and a mediator, because I find something. I work with microbes and I let them do the microbes. So what Yukari said, the GNM, I think, what originates from microbes, it's the main point. I am not the person who creates the fermentation. Microbes are responsible for it. And the best fermentations are the ones that have a spontaneous fermentation. So fermentation created or started by microbes. And I try to create the conditions in which microbes have the proper condition to modify themselves. So natural environments, or semi-natural, so the one that the man created and then worked in a sustainable way, are the perfect ways, are the ideal areas to create certain products, certain fermented product made by the man. In Italy, we have many traditions, for example, cheese, that are typical and are linked to the territory, but not the territory as a whole, as the whole Italy, but a territory that is a specific canteen, a specific piece of land. We are not talking about big things. We're talking about small areas. So, and the canteen in the farm of a person, the cheese in way, and in the areas of another farm, the cheese is slightly different. So we have the variability, we have the possibility to change, to choose, and not having the same flavor, not having the same product. So we do not need globalization of the market to diversify our diet, to diversify our flavors on our table. What we need is to respect diversity. So to have a strong, resilient ecosystem that can react to external phenomena, they need diversification. So this is linked and it affects species, because biodiversity is not only interspecific in different human beings or insects, microbes, mushrooms, etc., but even in the same species. So if we don't have diversity in the same species, we do not have the possibility to adapt at a population level. So that's why in the world we have the myth of the travel. So go somewhere else and meet other people and exchange experiences, exchange DNA. I think that you understand what I want to say. Of course, travelers are interesting people, and it's normal that when we travel, we fall in love with people that we meet. We fall in love with the idea. So from a cultural point of view, this means that biodiversity is fundamental to allow us to adapt to a universe that is welcoming us, but is asking us to change and to be able to change and accept the change. One of the people that inspired me in my job to respect human beings and the natural way of evolving through microbes, this idea of microbes as a part of our universe, part of our area, part of our soil, of all objects, not like bad microbes, but everything, this view for me was represented by Mufuoka. And when I read his book, he said, do not act. Do not act means respect, accept. In a human point of view, I think about what we call listen, to listen. When we can listen to a person, the relationship works much better. We can help a person that maybe is experiencing some difficulties. We have this approach towards our ecosystem. Do we? Can we acknowledge our ecosystem and realize that what we do has an impact on the world in which we are living? In my opinion, today is not so easy, but it's really important. And I like to talk about it when I have been invited, because I make miso in Italy and I use chickpeas, lentils, fava beans, green peas, barley, wheat, emmer wheat. So something that is not part of the culture in Asia, Japan, or China. So something that is made in those countries. But for me, I think that if I want to make something good in particular, I have to accept what I have. So when I was looking around me, I was looking for small producers, small farmers that work in an accurate way. And sometimes it's difficult to work with them because maybe in lentils, in chickpeas, I can find some land, I can find some stones, because they are small farmers. They don't have a big experience, so they can make mistakes. But I have to enhance it. So if I take legumes that I can find in Italy and I bring it into the market, people might not understand the value of that. But if I can enhance it through a process and I talk about it, it's important because I can transmit the importance of the culture, the ecosystem, human beings, and much more. And it's important to have a local products and transform them into particular products. If I can make a typical Italian product, I think that Italians will not pay attention to me. Thank you, Carlo, for your discussion, but I would like to give the floor to Johnny. I'm sorry about it.
Explain. Grazie, Carlo. Thank you. That was really, really interesting for me about the relationship between the microbes and the location. So before we move on to Johnny, we will be talking in English now. So if you need to switch to Italian, please do so from the bottom right of your screen. There's a interpretation icon button, so you can click on the languages that you prefer to listen to. 日本語でね、お聞きになりたい方、途中からご参加されている方は、画面右下にですね、通訳ボタンの地球儀のマークがあるんですけど、そちらをね、日本語をクリックしていただくと、日本語でお聞きになれますので、ぜひそちらをクリックしてください。Okay, thank you, Carlo. That was so interesting. And now we have our special guest, Dr. Johnny Drain, a fermentation consultant and umami scientist. As a chef designer and a scientist with a PhD in material science from the University of Oxford, Johnny works at the cutting edge of food, fermentation, design, and sustainability, helping to rethink how we will feed our future world in a more delicious and ecologically friendly way. Johnny is a leading expert on helping the world's best restaurants, bars, and food brands use fermentation to create and amplify deliciousness, sustainability, and reduce food waste. Today, he is tuning in from South America. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on to our first talk series. Can you share about your work, your story, and your connection to Japan, please?
Thank you, Tomoko, and thank you, Carlo, and the rest of the speakers thus far. Yeah, I think what Carlo said about the idea of traditions and culture resonated with me in particular, and actually in English, and I believe in Italian as well. This word culture has a dual meaning. So when we talk about the word culture in the context of fermentation, it can refer to the communities of microbes themselves, but then of course we use this word culture to refer to the customs of groups of people, whether that's, small groups of people, like Carlo said, a particular family making one particular cheese on one particular farm in a corner of Italy or the corner of Britain or Paraguay, where I am right now, or, broader communities of people, whole countries or geographic regions. So there is this dual meaning to this very important word, culture. And I think Carlo highlighted this importance of the idea of community, which connects greatly to ideas of circularity and regenerative practices, which I will talk about in a minute. And also this idea of the idiosyncrasies the uniqueness of locality, which when we talk about food, this is what we love about food. This is why we prize a particular cheese made in a particular region over a different cheese from a different region, and that goes for all different types of the foods that we love in many cultures around the world. So I first worked with Saito-san's GEN organization back in 2014, and I went on a research trip researching food culture in Mie Prefecture, and then also we worked on a project together researching Egoma and Beria in Toyama Prefecture. And I guess the great takeaway, the great learning experience that I had visiting Japan, and learning to make miso from these 70, 80, 90-year-old, mostly women, was this idea of how the value of these very old ancestral techniques that have been going for generations and generations and have been passed on down through families and companies for literally hundreds of years, and the idea of documenting, celebrating, preserving those techniques. Now I'm going to talk about circularity for a few minutes. Now, some of you might be familiar with what circularity is. It connects very greatly with what Yukako said and with the ambitions of Genoa, and it also connects with Yukari's slide that you saw earlier. So I guess the headlines about circularity, the first things to remember are that nature is inherently incredibly circular. And actually the old techniques that we use within food systems, and actually with lots of sort of manufacturing processes, these old techniques are inherently very circular. And actually it's sort of modern industrialized techniques, which are what we call linear, so non-circular. So circularity is in contrast to these more modern sort of linear practices, which can be defined by this idea of extractiveness, so taking, making, and then disposing of. And in contrast to that, circular practices aim to reuse, to share, to repair, to refurbish, to remanufacture, and to recycle, and create these closed loop systems like you saw on Yukari's slide earlier in the presentation. And the ambition of this, of course, is to minimize the use of the inputs into your system, minimize the creation of waste and pollution, minimize the creation of carbon emissions, and keep products and resources and inputs in use for as long as possible, and thereby improve the productivity of your resources. And a key element of this is the idea that the waste material from one process should serve as the input for a new process. And so you might be asking, well, that's all well and good, Dr. Johnny, but how does this relate to cheese? How does this relate to miso? How does this relate to food? Well, actually, when you look at food cultures around the world, what you see is that human beings have been incredibly innovative and creative in the way they use byproducts and waste processes, essentially because historically we didn't have a choice because life was very difficult. So when you look at a cheese, for example, I'll use an Italian example here in honor of Carlo and Genoa's sort of existence within Italy, but ricotta is a cheese that is made but from a byproduct of making another type of cheese. So ricotta, I believe, the translation in Italian literally means recooked, so cooked again. And ricotta was made as a way to extract all of the sort of the goodness that you had from this milk that you'd spent many months nurturing these cows and giving them food and pasturing them in some fields, and you'd put all of this knowledge and effort and energy and time into creating this milk, and you want to extract all of the possible goodness. So ricotta is a great example of circularity, where we try to extract all of the deliciousness, the energy, the resources from these food products that we have made. And you know, when we also talk about circularity, soil, of course, which basically nurtures everything we grow pretty much. You know, the sun creates energy via photosynthesis through plants, but it is the soil that is the sort of incubation chamber of those plants, and which then nurtures the rest of the food system. So soil is very critical to all of these processes, and is highly critical to a regenerative food system, which is what I believe, and I think probably Carlo and Yukaku and everyone else at Genoa believes is very important for us to nurture and create globally as we move forward at this particular point in human history. So I've got about two and a half minutes left. I'll just talk a little bit about my work. So I currently am what's called a pioneer for an organization called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, UK-based foundation, which focuses on circularity. They are very worth looking into if you're interested in learning more about circularity. And more recently, my work has involved being a participant on something called the Carbon 13 Venture Builder. So it is an incubator for enterprises and entrepreneurs. And I am currently building a company with a US partner, a woman called Aram Pak, whose family are originally from Korea. We are building a company that uses fermentation and fermentation techniques to take byproducts and unloved food products and create delicious condiments and sauces and things from these waste streams and byproducts. So this plays into harnessing these wonderful ancestral techniques, harnessing these wonderful microbial cultures, these communities of microbial cultures that Carlo referred to earlier, and basically reducing the waste, the sort of perverse and horrible and vast, wide-scale waste that we see in modern industrialized food systems. And fermentation is this incredible key which can unlock deliciousness and unlock, I guess, the resources that are existent in much of this wonderful food produce that the world produces, but for various reasons with industrialized food systems doesn't get used, and often either gets thrown away, it goes to landfill, or it is not sort of valorized in the way that it should be. So I think, I will draw to a conclusion my talk there, and I think now Carlo and I will engage in a dialogue, and we will take some questions, I believe.
Thank you, Johnny. That was really interesting about the circularity, and also Carlo. Thank you. I see. Can you explain what you have behind yourself? What is the shiny object you have?
Yes, of course. It's there are the small tanks of shoyu. I mean soy sauce. It's not soy sauce really, because it's made with chickpeas and beans and fava beans, but it's the same technique. And this is my my workshop, a part of my workshop. So I don't have a white wall, so I decided to show you in the background where I work. So sorry for that, but. Actually, at this moment, I'm using this special iron. It's called AISE 316, which is strong against saltness and acidity. But I'm slowly turning to wood, because one thing that maybe we don't think is, for example, in our European law, it is not easy to use wood in contact with food. So we need special permissions, special papers. And it took me 2 years to be able to start with wood because it's not accepted for so-called hygienic reasons. So this is just to show how sometimes our modern world is not going forward, but in a certain sense backwards.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. We see your precious babies behind you. And Carlo, did you have anything you wanted to mention to Johnny and expand
Yes.
on his conversations?
I especially connect with this talk of Johnny about waste. I always think waste is a word that shouldn't exist, because if you think in a natural way, in a natural world, there is no waste. There is only circularity, as Johnny said. And this is especially when you go in a big restaurant, in a modern restaurant, you see how much waste there is, and nobody cares about this waste. And I know, Johnny, you are working also in this kind of environment, let's say. And could you explain us a bit what you do or what you think about that?
Yeah, thanks, Carlo. So yeah, I work with lots of restaurants all around the world, actually. I'm very lucky. And a lot of them are quite high-end restaurants, so places with sort of Michelin stars, fancy fine dining restaurants that the average person might go to just once a year, or once every 5 years for a special occasion. And when I started working in those places, I was horrified to see all of this food, incredible food, expensive food, being thrown in the bin. So they would cook a piece of, let's say, deer, venison. You get very good venison in Britain. And they would chop off one side, chop off the other side, throw them in the bin, and they would put this perfectly shaped little fillet on a plate, and then put some jus and some berries and some whatever else. And this delicious, very expensive meat that I would be very happy to eat got thrown in the bin. So, I mean, I started literally taking it out the bin and eating it, because I was like, this is incredible. I want to taste what that tastes like, because I've not tried that. But when the more you work in those sorts of restaurants, the more you realize that is standard practice, essentially for cosmetic, aesthetic reasons. A lot of very valuable, nutritious food that could be feeding someone and making someone very happy just gets thrown in the bin. And then actually, when you zoom out and look at not just those sorts of restaurants, but lots of different places within the global food chain, there is an incredible amount of food waste. So something like 50%, one half of all fruit and vegetables that gets grown is thrown away. That number is reduced a little bit depending on the type of product. So for things like meat and other protein sources, it drops to about a third, 20%, but it's still an awful lot of the food that we grow gets thrown away. And we are in a position where it is thought that by the year 2050, with an increase in the global population, we will struggle in using the current approach to feed everybody on the planet. And so what we need to do is try to reduce some of that food waste in order to effectively and efficiently feed the world.
Yes. Could you maybe tell us, it happened to me, maybe to you too, I guess, that you try to recycle or reuse some of this waste, as you do all the time. And at a certain point, you see that the product you make with the waste is even better than the original product. I show you, for example, I make my soy sauce. This is my sauce. I don't know if you can see it. This is a bottle of sauce. And with the waste, let's say, I make this powder, which is, it's called umori because I don't know how to call it. And actually, many cooks that taste these two products say that the powder is more interesting than the soy sauce, which is a good soy sauce. But I think what is not clear for most people is that from the waste you cannot only gain something, but something even better than if you throw it away and you use only the main part.
Absolutely. So one of my close collaborators and good friends is an excellent chef called Douglas McMaster. He's a chef in the UK. He has a zero waste restaurant called Silo. And Doug has this incredible phrase, which is that waste is a failure of the imagination. Waste is a failure of the imagination, which I love. And so that just, what he means by that is simply that where we have waste within a system, basically it's just a lack of creativity, it's a lack of imagination. And what you speak about with your salt, your umori product there is simply that if you hadn't have discovered that product was waiting there in all its delicious glory to be discovered by you, and if it had been thrown away by somebody less sort of diligent and creative as yourself, it would be merely as a result of their lack of care or their lack of imagination. And wherever, or you look in lots of places around the world and in various food cultures, whether that's Japan or Italy or UK or Paraguay, and you find there are these wonderful examples where people have created products that are now really well loved out of what at one point could have been or might be to less discerning producers a waste product.
Yes, I agree completely. And one more thing before we go on, maybe, it's that this circularity is not only in the product. I see, for example, when I am able to do something with the waste, the so-called waste, it brings me to give some work, for example, to one more person. So there is a resource that is not only, for example, in the food, but also in the possibility for people to earn money or earn a living. And this is very important because often I see that the waste is only something that is putting down the level of wellness of the people, the real wellness, to be and to live well. And I guess if we all can make something better with our waste, we can do a lot of things.
Absolutely. And of course, one other thing there is that if you are, well, not just a small producer, but if you have a waste product and you are a producer of any size, often you might have to pay somebody to take that waste, in quote marks, and dispose of it somewhere. So there's often a financial cost to you as a producer. And secondly, that waste typically will go to a landfill where it will emit lots of carbon dioxide, and also potentially, landfills can pollute water streams. So it can have this very damaging effect on your environment, or actually because of the way the world is structured now, my waste might get taken to somewhere that's not close to me and pollute someone else's, water system. So there's lots of other good reasons, as you say, why using up waste and finding these incredible uses for it is a great endeavor.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny and Carlo, for the great conversation. And we would like to open the conversation to the audience. So if it's okay for you, please turn on your video. You can do so from your left side of your screen. If you have any questions, please ask in English, or if you prefer to ask in Japanese, we would like you to raise your hand. If you know there's a reaction button, and if you can press raise hand, we'll see you and we'll have you on screen. 日本語で質問されたい方はチャットボタンにですね、日本語でお書きいただくか、はい、もしくはこちら英語で質問されて OK の方は、こちらの右下のリアクションのところにね、レイズハンドボタンがありますので、手を挙げてください。Do we have any questions? We have a lot of people from all over the world here. And I think I did see one question in the chat box. Says, have you been able, so this is Zenetta Jelt's Organic Life. And he or she is saying that, have you been able to introduce some system changes in your country so the country respects more natural ways of living, such as agriculture, kitchen, etc. In Poland, where I live, VAT tax for organic fertilizer is 23%, and for chemicals like glyphosate, synthetic one is 8%. This influences choices that farmers are performing. Organic ways are simply expensive. Would you like to answer that, Johnny or Carlo?
Yes, maybe the problem is very big. I guess often in the politics, there is no sensibility for doing such things that would be very interesting. The point is we can do something in another field. It's not like the taxes, but the choices of a consumer of the market. What I see, for example, in Italy in the last, let's say, 20 years, is that more and more people had to trying to choose biological, organic foods, let's say. So the producers are stimulated to produce more organic food because there is a demand. And what we can do is we can speak with the market, to speak with the producer, and try to give them more money for more valuable food. Because actually the policy in the agriculture in international or national systems are not that fast in developing towards some more ecological. What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I agree completely. I guess I could also add that this question really speaks to just how, food systems are massive. They are globalized now. Secondly, they're incredibly complex and they involve lots of stakeholders. And, I suppose whereas Carlos and I, the place where we're standing is we're trying to educate, we're sort of trying to cook and eat our way out of this, food crisis. But what we also need to do is involve all of these other stakeholders. So whether that's, politicians and create legislation that can nudge and push people towards, investing in better techniques. So, in that example that Zanetta asked, changing that taxation to favor certain types of fertilizer over one, if that is a better choice. But yeah, just embracing all of the stakeholders within these very complex, global food systems.
Thank you. We see a lot of questions in the chat box, and there's one question for Carlo. This is a question from Hattori-san. He's a soy sauce producer, and he wanted to ask you, why did you want to start making miso?
Yes, thank you for the question. It fascinated me, and I was thinking, I first tried to make miso without knowing miso. And then I started intuiting that there is something special. Now I know that this tastes like miso, like shoyu, but also like some cheeses and other products, has this not only umami, but all the other aromatic compounds that stimulates our instinctively a sense of goodness. And when you encounter this, when you feel this, you want just to do it. And I was fascinated by Japanese culture from many times. But when I started making this special kind of fermentation, starting by Koji, and observing over long times how these aromas, how these flavors was developing, it was overwhelming to me. I couldn't stop from doing that.
Thank you, Carlo. And we have another question to Carlo as well. Shoko from Japan, she wanted to ask you about, so she said she used spelt wheat for sperto or for miso.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
she boiled it, but it was too hard. And so she made a salad out of it. So when you
Yeah.
make miso with the spelt wheat, do you boil it? How do you make miso with these spelt wheat?
Yes, I use a steam, so I steam it. I don't boil it, but I leave it in water first for like one night long, so it gets the humidity, and then you can steam it. With boiling, it tends to be too hard or too wet, so it's not very easy. Actually, it's not really spelt. It's another kind of similar, how to say, cereale, cereal. But you can do Koji Miso with nearly everything, and there are great examples. The question is always, has it a good sense? Is it sensible to make, for example, a miso with something that is not really from your environment? And that's the point to me, not if it's better with maize or with spelt or with corn or with whatever.
Thank you, Carlo. We have another question. It's in the chat box, but it's in Italian.
Yes.
From Yukiko Hayashi. Carlo, do you see the question?
Yes. Why it has been chosen Venice for the Genoa project? And I guess it's because there is the Biennale di Venezia, which is a very important, I don't know how to call it, a show, an event in which this project has been, will be presented. So it's because of this event, this Biennale.
Thank you, Carlo. And we have a question from another Carlo. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the interesting interventions of the speakers. My name is Carlo Alberto Franci, graduate student in International Agri-Food Trade Law. I wanted to ask Dr. Carlo Nesler, who rightly highlighted the difficulties that Italian and European law still have in recognizing and facilitating the type of circular production that CN and other entrepreneurs are carrying out. How can legislation help entrepreneurs like you?
This is a good question. The point is that the laws always try in a certain way to make the better thing for the user, so the consumer in this case, and this has some difficulties sometimes for the producer, which is not always a bad thing. It's only a matter of control. To me, the main thing would be to try to understand the developing of new techniques or old techniques in a new way. Because, for example, I can make now, not only me, we can make now better soy sauces, meat sauces, fish sauces than 1,000 years ago, of course. And we have hygienic necessities that are others than it was 1,000 years ago, but often the law stays behind and not develops together with the technology, the culture, and the taste of people. So there should be a relationship between the people who makes laws, sorry, and the people who works, let's say, in the field. So there should be a dialogue, which is not so common. Only the industry, the big industries, can talk with the ones who makes the laws. So it would be good if there would be a smaller a producer that can get to associations and speak to the governments. And also there is in some countries some that is very good, that is different laws for bigger companies and for small companies. So I always make the same example. If I get a small batch of, let's say, wheat, and I have to clean it, I can look with my eyes and with my hands take out the something that is not good in it. But if I have tons of wheat, it could not be with my hands, with my eyes. If there is a mouse, a rat in the wheat, it will not be seen. Maybe there is a totally different way of working. It's not only about good and bad, but also that there are different needs in a big scale or in a small scale. And this is not often in the laws, respected in the laws.
Thank you, Carlo. Another question from Misaki from Japan. She's a chef and she also explores miso. Her name is Iwaki Misaki. And she was asking, I'm assuming this is a question for you, Carlo. She was saying that you make miso with all sorts of beans. And she wanted to ask you about, like, do you kind of experiment on the combinations such as koji, salt, and fermentation, the amount of time you ferment those beans with all of the different types of beans?
Yes, I have been experimenting with many different kind of legumes and beans, and I have seen that there are many differences, and you can do a lot of things. What I see is we assume often that it's much better to use something specific, but then we see that there is something more than this. You can use the same chickpeas cultivated in two different places from different people, and the result is very different. So what I suggest always is not stop trying and not assume that the things are as clear and linear as we assume. Often you change a bit and it is totally different. For example, I know that there are people that try to lower the salt content in miso extremely, and they try to do something good, but actually the salt is needed by the microorganisms to select themselves. So if you lower the salt, it's not just not that salty, is that it becomes more acid and it becomes another kind of aroma. So for example, when I ferment lemons, I have noticed that if I lower the salt content too much, the taste will be bad. But it's more salt than, for example, when I try to ferment other fruits or vegetables. So there is a lot of things that we can consider and try different things. I don't know if I answered the question. Maybe I haven't understood well what she wanted to know.
Thank you, Carlo. I think you did answer her questions. So another question from the soy sauce producer, Hattori-san. How did you get the koji in Italy?
So I buy the tane koji from Japan, actually, from a big good producer in Japan, and I make my koji myself. So I'm a koji producer, and I started, of course, my way of producing koji in Italy, which of course is a bit different as in Japan, the traditional way, but it works good. And so
nice. Yeah, we have a comment from Mao Nakamura-san. She's saying that I'm also interested in about getting Koji there. So we have a lot of interest of people wanting to make miso outside of Japan. We have a comment and question from Takuya, Mr. Takuya Murahashi. So he wants to ask questions about soil. So how to work on soil and then restore the soil. He wanted, so this question, maybe Johnny, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, so what you see is that with a lot of current large-scale industrialized farming practices, where you're using a lot of inputs, so fertilizers essentially, what happens is that over successive harvests, the soil essentially loses its potency, it loses its ability to sustain life, in the sense that it loses its sort of microbial potency. What you have in good sort of healthy, rich soil is lots of nutrients, and then lots of microbes, typically fungi, that form these really important interactions in terms of getting nutrients from places within the soil to the root structure of a particular plant, and that will let your plant feed itself and thrive and produce, whether it's some spelt or some rice or some corn, whatever. So that's being lost, and what we need to do is make sure, a lot of people who are using regenerative farming practices now, if you ask them, what do you farm? They will say, I farm soil. So instead of saying I farm apples or I farm sweet corn, they'll say I farm soil, which is quite odd if you think about it, but actually really that is what you are doing. And those regenerative practices where you're thinking actually not so much about what plant or tree you're growing, but actually how the soil is behaving and whether that is well looked after and whether that has the things that it needs to thrive and be rich and sustain life is actually most critical. And that's why this idea of cover crops and mulching and taking things that are waste and putting them back into the field, tilling them back, so you're sustaining and regenerating that soil and letting these microbes, these fungi, break down the leaves of this the mulch and therefore restore nutrients to the soil to then sustain life further down the line.
Thank you, Johnny. Another question for you, Johnny. This is from Stefania Adeleo. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his or her name correctly, but hi everyone. I want to ask Johnny if, based on his experience, restaurants are open and interested in working and investing in transforming food waste or not.
Yeah, great question. 5 years ago, no. Today, to a degree, yes. I would say within the last probably just 2 years, maybe 3 years, there has been a surge in interest by, not every restaurant, but lots of restaurants, certainly in that kind of higher end fine dining strata. But actually, there are lots of vast chain restaurants that some people might think are a bit evil, who are now interested in these sorts of practices. For them, it's to do with economics. They think or if they see they can save money, then they're interested in doing it. I think I don't really care about the type of restaurant or why they're interested in it, but as long as people are. But yeah, really there is a surge in interested people looking at these techniques and trying to, in however small way, transform the practices within their kitchen to reduce the waste output of the average kitchen.
Thank you, Johnny. We have a comment from, this is from ET Kitchen Tea and Calligraphy to everyone. He commented that, thank you for an amazing initiative. I am a chef, tea and sake sommelier in Cologne, Germany. I have been introducing the making miso, kimchi, and shoyu to restaurants and home cooks. I also introduced regional organic agricultural products to ferment miso, kimchi, and soy sauce. There's a tea plantation in Germany as well as Casa del Tè in Italy. And next month, I will teach tea pairing and how to reuse the organic quality tea to use in sustainable way. Thank you.
Very interesting. Yes.
Mhm. Very interesting. Okay, so next question. Did we answer? Let's see. Okay.
I see here a question about rice. Dear chef, I don't use rice for making koji because we don't cultivate rice here in this particular area. It's a bit too far for me, where they cultivate rice in Italy, which is about 400 to 500 kilometers from here. I did it, but I don't have this much experience. What I see in general is that we should think not in terms of good and bad, but in differences. So you cannot say that a product is good or bad. It's better or not good for a specific use. So, for example, if you use a special type of plant, it's good for one dish and it's not good for the other. And another plant is different. So just try and find out for what this particular rice is good, which is the characteristics.
And ultimately, you know, these microbes are very, they're like humans. They're very adaptable and flexible. If you give them what they want, you know, if you give them a source of you know, carbohydrates and proteins and sugars, they will thrive very happily, whether it's a grain of rice or a grain of spelt. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. We have another question from Yuki. So she has a question about food waste. So she wanted to ask if you can make such as let's see, condiments from food waste. So she was asking that Carlo, that you use moromi, the fermentation broth, for and is there any other material that you can use for condiments to make, or food
Yes,
waste
actually,
to make
yeah.
condiments?
You can use a lot of food waste, even meat or fish waste or bones or vegetables. There is a lot of things. The only thing is you have to experiment and to find the right way to transform the waste in something delicious. But there is a lot of possibilities. For that, I hope that in the future, the networking between people that has this kind of interest is growing, because if there is, for example, a restaurant or a salami producer, say, or something that has waste that cannot transform this waste in delicious food, there could be another company, another small producer that can use this waste to make something good. And this is the point where I say, if we are a small producer or small scale producer, we have to work together and not see each other as to fight one against the other, but to use the waste of one to make something delicious on the other part. And this is what I am trying to do in my small company, but I hope that we can make this better and better and better in these years.
Thank you. So we have another question to Carlo. It's in Italian. It's from Sylvia. Can you see the
Yes.
question?
Yes, Sylvia says, for a small producer who wants to commercialize, to sell my products as a So your products, how you can make the healthy controls necessary to sell this stuff. I don't understand well what she means, but I think there is something that is not very clear, at least in Italy or in other European countries. That is how it works with the healthiness of food in a point of in a loyal, how you say, from the legal point. That is, we have this system that is called HACCP, which is a control that you do on your own production, and the government makes controls on your way of controlling your work. So it's a bit weird to explain, but I think the people who are listening to us are familiar with this. And this means that we have no obligation to make a control over the food, because we know that all the process we do is controlled, and what we produce is okay. And there is in each company the manual that says how you have to control and how you can be sure of the healthiness of your food. And this is from one product to the other is different. So the problem is this: if you don't work well, if someone doesn't work well, we don't have a way to control it. We just can bring this product to a lab to control, but it's not an efficient way to make controls. I mean, you cannot say, I buy something and I bring it to a lab, which is more expensive than the product itself. I don't know if I have explained it clearly, but it's.
Thank you, Carlo. We have another question from Ai Yamada. She lives in Italy and she works in the restaurant field. And the city she lives in is Firenze. And then, of course, in Italy, you drink a lot of coffee. So there's a lot of coffee grinds and waste. And then a lot of restaurants are using coffee grinds to plant or a mushroom or shiitake mushroom. And then that's an interesting way of recycling the food waste. So Johnny and Carlo, I would like to ask Johnny, do you see similar interesting food cycle in your region as well, such as this case?
Actually, what you see, because, essentially food habits have homogenized over the last 50 to 60 years. So actually, wherever you are in the world these days, there are differences, of course, but what we eat has sort of become more similar, which, there's lots of great things about that, because, hopefully it means people are eating more of the things they want and more nutritious things and more delicious things. But what that means also is that you see that a lot of food waste streams, whether you're in North America or Europe or South America, contain, let's say, the usual suspects, of which one is coffee grounds. Coffee kind of fuels the world, right? It's 6:30 now, so when I get off this call, I'm definitely going to have another coffee. And the result of this globally is that we produce vast amounts of coffee grounds, and typically most of that just got thrown away. You can use it for you can put it back into your soil in some cases, but it tends to be quite can affect the pH in a way that you might not want. So people have started innovating around using coffee grounds, for example, pressing an oil that you can then burn from them, making exfoliants, so face scrubs from them. But within that top list of food waste, usual suspects, there are a few kind of apples, chicken products, because the world now eats vast amounts of chicken. Something like 50 billion chickens get slaughtered every year, huge numbers. So there are a number of usual suspects and trends, and it's those that we need to, I would say, we said earlier that waste is a failure of the imagination. I would also add that not all waste is created equal. So we need to target the ones that are produce most, and also that are most damaging. It's much worse to waste a kilo of beef than it is to waste a kilo of lettuce, for example, because of the inputs that have gone into produce that kilo of food.
Thank you.
On that topic, maybe there is to say that the scale is also influencing a lot the possibility to recycle or to reuse, because if you have a small scale, you can do a lot with the waste. If the scale is bigger, if you have tons of coffee, you don't know what to do. If you have a bit, you can make mushrooms, and then you can use it to fertilize the soil, which is much better after the mushrooms has grown in it. And this is for all. For example, if I make some vegetables fermented, the waste of the vegetable can be used sometimes for a soup. But if I have tons of vegetable waste, I can't use it because it's too complicated. So the same is what is the traditional way of farming. What was the traditional way of farming nearly all over the world is a bit of animals, a bit of vegetables, a bit of cereals. And in this way, the waste of one part is utilized in the other. So, for example, the ricotta example of Johnny before is what is the way that is at the end of the ricotta making in ancient time was given to the pigs. So it was not wasted. But nowadays, if I make cheese, probably I don't have as many pigs as I make cheese or the waste. So to come back to a smaller scale or a more differentiated production is, to me, a way to make a better product and better environment.
And just to also add, that's also where this idea of legislation and politics comes into play, because in a modern food system, even if I produce my cheese and my whey and Carlo has lots of pigs, there's probably some legislation that prevents me or prevents Carlo from buying that whey from me. So that's why we need to engage with politicians and create sensible legislature that enables people to use these byproducts in a helpful, meaningful way.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Johnny and Carlo. Another question from Aki Kawaguchi-san from Japan. So we were talking about circulation, and soil is very important. So what can we do in our regular daily life to have this healthy circulation? What can we do?
To me, the most important thing is to choose products that are from the region and to choose products from people that we know. What I suggest always is to get in contact with the producer, to not make a long chain from the product, from the producing part to the consumer part, because this allows us not to have a control. If I look in the eyes of the producer, I can understand if he's okay and what he's saying is correct or not. And I can look at his field or his factory or whatever and understand what he's doing. And this is always, for me, the better way to get a better way to consume and produce what you can. So go to a fermentation workshop and you can produce half the things you eat in your kitchen.
Beautiful. Thank you. Johnny,
I would say, another simple tip would be more like your grandmother. If you buy like your grandmom, and cook like your grandmom, then you will probably be less wasteful and more circular, because that's how definitely our grandparents, some of us, our parents, behaved, and they did so because there was no choice. It was much more difficult to be wasteful in, you know, the early part of the 20th century, when things were simply less abundant, and food systems were less industrialized, and we just didn't have that choice to be wasteful.
Yes, and try to buy ingredients and not products. So if you buy flour and eggs, you can make your cake, and you don't buy a cake. Not always, but try to do yourself things. This is joyful, it's nice, it's good for you and for people you love, and it's something that is so nice, so interesting. And often we lost the occasion to make it. It's a pity.
Thank you. And another question from Mio-san from Japan, Sujani. So she has a small garden in her yard, and she's making vegetables, but she's not a specialist or anything. So how can she tell if her soil is in a good form, or the condition of the soil is good or not?
So I'm definitely also not a soil expert, but you could start by taking the pH of the soil. So you could get a very inexpensive pH meter or some pH testing strips, and that will give you an insight into its sort of health and microbial activity. You know, soil is one of those things that it's very intuitive. If you go into a field and you stick your hands and your head and your nose into soil, even if you don't really understand what good or bad soil is, there is something that will sort of speak to you. If you put really healthy, rich soil up to your nose, you can smell this, you know, you wouldn't want to eat it, but it's like sticking your head over a good bowl of soup that someone has lovingly cooked for you. There, you can just tell. You smell it and you go, okay, there's something in that that's deeper. There's something in that's sort of bigger and richer than me, and I might not be able to see it, but I can just intuitively tell that it's there. If you go to a field where the soil has been sort of extractively drained of its resources over successive harvests, it will be very pallid. It won't have much of a smell or a sense, and it will feel sort of powdery and light. And so I would say you can sort of intuitively trust your senses a little bit on it. So get your hands dirty, use some objective, more scientific criteria like pH, and then also, don't forget to feed it. Make sure that you are, like Carlo said, adding what might be kind of waste back to your field or your small plot of land. You can do that in a small way in your house by adding compost, the things that you don't use, back to your vegetable plot.
Thank you, Gianni. So we have the last question. Thank you, Gianni and Carlo. This is from Stefania De Leo. I have another question for you, which is the most interesting food waste you have worked with and that gave the best result in terms of final product and sustainability. So that's a question. Which is the most interesting food waste you have worked with and that gave the best result in terms of final product and sustainability? And do you think fermentation is always the best way to transform food waste? So this is a question for both of you.
So I answered the second question, Gianni, and the first you can answer. I don't think that fermentation is always the best way. There are many ways for sure, but the creativity is the best way. So I know people who takes waste and just put it in an oven or fry it and makes some delicious food, and I think it's special. But maybe it's special for a restaurant and not for a farmer. So you have to contextualize the solution. So for the farmer, it may be best to make an easy compost with a vegetable waste, for example, which is another use that a restaurant or a food producer like me can do. So we can use a lot of things. Fermentation is very, very good, because the taste of fermented food is very, very special. So, for example, if I have onions that I cannot use in another way, I ferment them and make them with them something it's special. If I just, for example, dry them, it's not that tasty. So, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I don't think, for me, on a personal level, I would say it should just be what is most delicious to you. You know, so many uses of food waste that exist within, you know, ancestral techniques and food cultures around the world are really fascinating. We can pick one, which I guess is one of my favorite, but garum, which is this sort of Roman fish sauce, is particularly, you know, interesting and beautiful because it's so simple. So essentially you take fish guts and you add salt, and literally if you combine those two things in a vessel and leave them, then they will, with the addition of this very important thing we call thyme, transform into this incredible you know, brown liquid, which will then add incredible flavor and depth, richness, complexity to anything that you add it to. And I suppose what is interesting about that, well, it's just the simplicity of it, and this idea that you can take something which on the face of it, fish guts are a bit icky, you know, you might smell those and think, well, I'm definitely not going to eat those. Although, you know, people do eat fish guts in some food cultures, but you can take that thing which might repulse you, depending on what food culture you're from, at one point in time, and simply by adding salt and curating the right conditions, which is what fermenters like Carlo and I do. We curate the environments for these microbes or these processes. With time, it turns into something very different and complex and joyous.
Thank you, Johnny and Carlo. Before we close, I wanted to inform everybody, if you can take a look at the chat box, we have this link to our next event, which is the Joto Sai ritual for Jinen exhibition at ECC Venezia Biennale 2021. It's happening on May 14th. So we're gonna have Tono Mirai from Japan. He's the architecture of Japan. Tono Mirai architectural texture global Shinto ritual. So you will be able to observe this Shinto ritual for this ceremony for May 14th. So if you can click on this Eventbrite link, and you'll be able to register. And also for Genoa community registration for events and news and our next talk event, you can also click on the third link, genoaitaly.substack.com. So please take a look at the chat box right here. And also, if you wanted to connect with Johnny and Carlo, we have their website URL here. Carlo's website URL is https://nesler.it. And Johnny, Dr. Johnny Drain's website is https://Dr. DRJOHNNY. So Dr. Johnny, double N, drjohnnydrain.com. That's the URL. So thank you so much for joining us. If you can all unmute, we would want to thank Carlo and Johnny. If you can give both of them a big round of applause. Everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。皆様、ご参加いただきありがとうございました。Thank you so much for attending our first online talk series. We can see everybody's faces. Thank you. ありがとうございます。So once again, we would want to thank Johnny and Carlo and everybody who participated today. Thank you very much, everybody who gave us a lot of questions. That was a really fun talk event. So for further information for the next sessions, we will keep you posted through our newsletter and our Facebook page. So see you next session, and happy fermenting. ありがとうございました。
Bye bye. Arigato.
Thank you, Carlo.
Arigato.
Thank you.
Thank you.